me do the transition over. Um, I've got two great guests, Ginevra and Jamie slash Infinite Nutshell. And why don't I have the two of you say hi real quick?
Hello, I'm Ginevra. I'm a Netrunner player in Australia. I'm a modmin on GLC, and you usually ask when people started, don't you? And I
That's
thought
usually my
about
next
this.
question after the intros. But yeah, if you want to start
Oh,
with
okay.
that, that's fine too. I don't mind at all.
I started at the end of 2020, and so the first kind of pack cycle thing release I had was Salvaged Memories, which was a
Wow.
Oh,
little of an odd one.
wow.
And Jamie, how about would you like to introduce yourself
Yeah,
now?
I'm Jamie. I use they, them. I am the rules manager at Null Signal Games. Um, Locally, I have a reputation for building a lot of janky decks and running snare in just about every corp. Um, I
Totally fair.
started playing Netrunner. Uh, the first pack, the latest pack when I started playing was opening moves. And my first Netrunner memory is I had just gotten my core set, and the plugged-in tour was coming to Pandemonium, the game store in the Boston area. Um, and yeah, I did not play in the tournament. I just showed up with my core set and the pre-constructed decks and looked for casual games. Uh, I got a couple, but I did also get to play against the Damon and I'm not sure who the other person their gunslinging was. It might have been Stewart. But I got to play against Jinteki and Wayland spin cycle cards that no one had seen yet, like Shock and Punitive.
Oh, that's such a weird way to start the game, but sounds like it would have been a
Right?
lot of fun.
It
Yeah.
was great. And then because I was already friends with the events manager at Pandemonium, when they started doing like a weekly Netrunner tournament, like right after that, I wound up being tapped to judge it. So like
Hmm.
I jumped right into like the rules and
That's
TO
cool.
and so forth.
Really dived in deep. And yeah, I think
And
you
here we
said
are like 9 years later or whatever.
I know. I feel a little bit bad. I sniped some of my most prolific chatters to come on and actually talk on camera. So I think the rest of the chat has to step it up today. But it's great to have both of you on. And Jamie, I don't know actually that there's a ton of rules questions, but this is definitely a good day to bring them up. And we already have a complaint arguing that neutral is not a faction. When I believe the copy text for my spoilers were
I I
that it
did
was
point
three
that out
faction
when
cards.
I saw the schedule. I was like, hey, this is not correct description of the AIs. And that was acknowledged as a note. And if it didn't get corrected, then that's on the community team.
I actually think in their defense, I think they did go back and fix it. But definitely that's one of those things where like the first text. Sorry, I'm playing with my levels to try and match everyone else's. So apologies for the slight weirdness.
Yeah,
Um,
there's one more entry in the schedule that's maybe a little misleading
yeah,
that we
yeah.
were kind of joking about in the null signal discord about how you have to like kind of squint a little bit to have what it says be accurate.
Yeah.
um People will know what I mean when that day happens.
Oh,
All right. Well, we also have a
or a
bunch of
thing to
cards.
work out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah,
I've
we're
given a bunch
relying.
of things to work out.
Hmm.
So Slumscast is coming out next week, and they interviewed several null signal folks, including me. uh and since they recorded ahead of time, we had not total idea of what would be spoiled yet. Um, but I put a couple of like, oh yeah, here's some trivia that you can figure out maybe once you know the cards. So look forward to that.
Yeah, and I think it's what do we have? We've got like basically we've seen almost no NBN cards. We're missing a couple of HB cards. We have I guess we got a few Jinteki cards, but not nearly all that we're going to get, is my sense. I think someone has a really nice spreadsheet up on Reddit where they've been crunching the numbers, and there's still a good chunk of cards missing. So I think, while the next week might be a little bit slower in terms of like cards per day, I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff out there still. But I think without much further ado, we should go to oh, that was not meant to be the first card. Let's go in numerical order, which is what I always do. And we'll grab this as the first card. So this is Reprise. It is a 2-cost run event in Criminal for 3 influence. And it says, play only if you stole an agenda this turn. Add 1 installed corp card to HQ. You may run any server. And then the flavor text is, I may bow like I've accomplished the impossible, but the truth is, it's not that hard. So this is quite the card. I would say it's I think controversial is not the right word, but it is harkening back to one of the most, a couple of cards of Leela is the obvious comparison, and then Kraken is the other one.
In a couple of ways.
Yeah. I should say also, this first set of cards spoiled were spoiled by the Shadow Net, which had Anzuke and Eric both as guests on. It's great that Zeroth Maxima, aka Phil, was able to get Eric back on as a guest.
Yeah.
But I think people should go check out that podcast. There's a lot of really good talk about narrative design and even like meta design from Eric, even though he's not really in Null Signal. Thank you, Thanos, for posting it in the chat. It will also be linked in the description if you're watching this on the YouTube video. But I should now give my guest actually a chance to talk about this card. So apologies. Ginevra, it sounded like you had a comment right before I cut you off.
No, I was going to ask because I know you're more into the very highly competitive aspect of it.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, I go, okay, how many times am I ever going to steal an agenda? Which I know is pessimistic thinking, but nonetheless, so I'm that was my initial reaction to the card, was like, okay, I can put it, like, I can use it maybe sometimes if it's in my hand, but I'm going to have to be lucky. But that might be because I'm not great at playing. So from a more competitive point of view, would you think that this would be going to be useful? Or would you... Like, is this a 46th card? 47th? Or is this a definite include? Supposing you're playing Criminal or something relevant.
Yeah.
I feel like for the competitive players, like Criminal Deep Dive deck might have it at about the 45th, 46th card slot, because it just makes your day that much better if you're trying to pull off your combo turn, or maybe you were just making a central run, you sniped something, and oh, I guess I'm doing the combo turn now because I can bounce their ice.
Yeah,
But
I think I'm going to quickly shout out Simply the Onion saying that this card does have an interesting difference from Leela, which this can bounce any installed card, not just a unres card, which is a big power bump. But obviously the power cost is that this ends up basically being a card that you have to hold in your hand up until a point where you're doing something great. And if you steal an agenda on click 4, this card is still kind of dead in your hand. So it's going to be... It's a tricky one to evaluate.
Unless you're Sable and you got click 5.
Oh, that's true. Yes. So I should say on your final click. Let's maybe put it that way. I'll be a little more precise with my language.
No, I'm also thinking
are technically not numbered at all.
Oh goodness. You're right. Clicks are not numbered. But yeah. So I think it's, I think this card has some it's hard because this card is going to have games where it feels super, super dead in your hand. Like holding a card in your hand and then being like, oh, I get to bounce an ice wall is going to feel bad. The games where you get to like bounce a a endless EULA or something or a toll booth feel great. And then the games where you're like, oh, I get to actually bounce the rezzed anoetic void in your remote and then go and punch through and grab a remote that was supposed to be completely safe are going to feel amazing. But it's going to be that kind of like, how often can I set up the situation that's beneficial for me to hold, basically play with one fewer card in my deck in for like half of the game potentially.
Here's a
I guess
question coming at it from like the complete other side. Could this be a tech card that you slot in a shell game meta?
because you are going to steal agendas, you think?
Because you're going to steal an agenda and then you get rid of that like 4 advanced thing that you've been unable to risk checking if it's a clearinghouse or an overrider.
Mm. I was also thinking if sports is a really big thing in the meta, because often they have like or another corp that has just like lots of agendas that they don't mind you stealing a couple, then this would be nice.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's lots of people talking about different uses for this. Doomrat and a couple of people like, oh no, if you're playing this against PE, this is always going to be the card that gets hit by damage every time, guaranteed. Um,
Right. But then it was a hit point and you don't have to
yeah,
feel
Yeah.
bad about it having been a dead card.
yeah, no, I agree. I think I do think actually that's a
It's
really
like
good
the
point that it
you
does.
can sell it to the pawn shop argument for installables.
Yeah, yeah. Against PE, every card's equivalent, right? So it doesn't matter. And sometimes this would have an upside against PE. So yeah, I think look, I'm probably not going to be slotting it in my competitive decks right away. But I'm going to expect that when I show up to a tournament and I play against something like a deep dive Sable, that this is a card is going to kind of just have a blowout board state on me every time and again, every now and again. And like it might just completely wreck me sometimes. And I think that's really fun to have this
Mm.
card that gets just this huge swing in the right situation.
And
Um,
I think the fact that Mad Dash sees play, Seabass mentioned just now in the
Yeah.
chat, Mad Dash, that says a lot about the viability of an effect like this.
Yeah,
Like if
definitely.
people are playing Mad Dash, then that means that they can anticipate when they're going to steal agendas.
yeah, it's
Yep.
true. I think I mean Mad Dash is played almost exclusively in Stargate decks, and I don't know if you're play. I mean, maybe this is like a you can punch a like you grab an agenda out of R&D and then you use this Reprise to keep R&D open. Um, because you don't even have like you could bounce the ice on R&D, but then like say, oh, I'm going to go and run HQ instead. There's no requirement that the installed corp card has any relation to the server you go and run. So like this one card is doing a lot of I mean like work that's almost an otherwise impossible effect to achieve, and then also letting you make a run. So it is paying for itself in a lot of different ways. Should we maybe move on to the next card in the set? Has
I
been
love the
spoke.
art, is the last thing I'll say about Reprise.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece. I actually like the even from Midnight Sun. I feel like the art has stepped up a good chunk to
Yeah.
quite a good
I,
level.
I
I
I
think.
feel like this is Sable's like conceptual piece, like
Yeah.
the twinning was for Asa.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the the music around her is not like meat space or net space. It's conceptual,
Mm.
and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we didn't actually point out that the quote is a riff on Leela's flavor text.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Actually, I won't. Yeah. Anyway. Or no, not anyway, but just moving on. I'm gonna go to the next card. Poison Vial is a 2-cost hardware weapon. When you install this hardware, load 3 power counters onto it. When it is empty, trash it. Hosted power counter. Break up to 2 subroutines. Use this ability if you have already broken a subroutine during this encounter. And this is a 2 influence criminal card. And it says the flavor text is the poison cuts deeper than the blade.
E3 feedback implants. We're back, baby.
Yeah, let me go. For those of you who had the Jamie, am I correct in saying this is one of your? I'm not gonna say favorite cards, but one of your most played cards of all time. Uh,
Absolutely. So E3 is a card that makes weird rigs work. Like if you're doing some kind of AI rig, which plenty of AIs to talk about today, um, and it's like two to break a subroutine, or if you're using like something with another weird cost like Faust, Endless Hunger, anything that the cost to break subroutines is significant as the delta between one and the rest of them, E3 makes that an actual viable solution. So David is one of the best examples, I think.
yeah,
David was a card back in the lunar cycle that had 3 power counters. We didn't have charge back in the day, so it's just you get to break 3 subroutines on high strength ice, and then you have to have like a clone chip or something.
yeah. The other card I'm thinking of is one I talked about in my video, which was Overmind. This was classically you would pay one power counter off of your Overmind, then a bunch of real credits to go and use the E3
Yep.
feedback. So Quetzal also getting a lot of love in the chat for being another an actually standard legal card uh, that you can play. Let me go and grab that. Um, so yeah, I actually have been a little surprised that no one has mentioned as with this card, just because of the boomerang kind of synergy that you could put down in theory with this, where it's like, oh yeah, any 3 sub ice I now get to break, or 4 sub ice kind of thing. But maybe that's there's some playtesters who really like as, so every time a hardware comes out, everyone's like as. It's like
There's so much though. There's so much stuff for as in this set.
uh,
I am so hyped to. So I have a startup deck that's as Masterwork, Q Loop shenanigans, um, and I've been having so much fun with it that I don't want to just stop playing it when startup rotates. I'm going to convert it into standard, and there are so many things.
yeah, and actually
It's very exciting.
Doomrat also shouting out Kongamatu, um, all and also Gabali. Has that rotated?
Ollie,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. These also both synergize with Poison Vial. So you can start building some funky rigs. Obviously, we're really sad that there's not a tech trader to make this deck work. But I guess you could play a Wasteland, right?
If you really want to get value out of your trash can abilities, yeah, you can play Wastelands and or you can play the back.
Oh yeah, the back is another one. Yeah, that's
The back
true.
is a card that
Still
exists.
there.
The back is the good recursion card from Ashes. So uh
Wow. I'm not used to you
Ask.
saying my janky cards are good.
the back recurs so many cards. Oh yeah, this was actually the other point is like Jamie, you were talking about that Apex build earlier. I feel like this you could do a Poison Vial Apex build with all of these
Oh,
pirate
absolutely.
breakers. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to do some kind of pirate poison vial build. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it in Shaper or in Apex.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I'm an Apex player. E3 was always a mandatory include for Apex back in the day when it was legal. Um, and yeah, if you're expecting to break anything with Endless Hunger, you will really want Poison Vial.
Yeah.
Can I ask a really beginner style question? Um, when it says the hosted power counter, do you pay with the power counter? So
Yep.
you only get like 6 goes with this kind of?
Yeah,
No.
you
If
can so this
if you
card's
don't
gonna
have any charge effects, you get 3 uses, and each use spends 1 power counter to break up to 2 subroutines.
Yeah. But
But
then
of
you
course,
might want to
you might
put
have
it in a
charge.
charged deck. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we haven't
Because there
seen
wasn't
Oh, go
lots of
ahead.
stuff to do with charge before.
Yeah, and we're gonna
I
see
think we've
an
seen one. card that lets you charge something so far?
Yeah, yeah,
No, I'm just thinking of Midnight Sun. Like
yeah.
there were a number of things.
There was really only two cards I can think of. There
Yeah,
was Endurance, obviously, then the other charge target from Midnight. Oh, I guess Environmental Testing was technically is also a charge target, and then the last one I'm thinking of is the Twinning. Stone Chart does charge. It doesn't have charge synergy itself, whereas like any card that says power counter does. And I actually think there's one of the, I think it might even be the next card we talk about, has a lot of charge synergy, and like I think it actually makes the whole charge archetype make a lot more sense. Oh, Revolver, Shishu is calling out. Uh, it's a good
Yeah,
one.
there are quite a few cards with power counters, but the really spicy ones, it seems like, are in this set.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
other than Endurance, nothing in Midnight Sun really tops the kind of things that you could do with older, like Earthrise Hotel is your kind of standard charge target.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, the twinning is cool, but it's kind of just a direct replacement for Turning Wheel. Like, not that it is the same, but it is doing a similar role, and they both use power counters. So like, if Turning Wheel hadn't rotated, then it would be uh one of the obvious things in the same way that Earthrise is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I shouldn't look at a transition like that in the mouth. And let's just talk about what seems like basically a turning wheel, not turning wheel replacement, but a turning wheel uh,
It's
riff. I don't know.
it's the
Uh,
blue answer to Turning Wheel rotating, whereas twinning was the orange answer to Turning Wheel rotating.
yeah, and I think there's good like I we can talk more about why I'm actually more excited about Wake Implant than I am about Twinning, which also will make it interesting when for a tier ranking. But let's talk about I'll talk about Wake Implant and then we'll go into it some more detail. So, Wake Implant, one
Ooh.
cost, unique Wake Implant V2A JRJ. It is a cybernetic hardware. When you install this hardware, suffer 1 meat damage. Whenever you make a successful run on HQ, place 1 power counter on this hardware. Whenever you breach R&D, you may remove up to 3 hosted power counters to access that many additional cards. And this is 3 influence. Um, I also will start by saying this art is actually amazing, an amazing little piece of character work. I don't know, I don't recognize the artist's name. Do we know if this is if they're new for the set? I'm maybe asking the wrong set of people,
I
but
should know this and I don't.
it's all
Sorry.
no. Um, but yeah, I think this is a great piece. And Morgan talked
Really
about how
lovely.
there was additional flavor on what this Wake Implant is doing. But to find out the full details, you should go to. Okay, Morgan said Zefania is a returning FFG artist. Cool.
Cool.
But there's some lore
Yeah,
that was on the Shadownet podcast. So if you want to go find out what the
Mm.
Wake Implant is doing in universe, I'd really go recommend checking it out. Um,
you even get to find out what's on the chip that Sable is slotting into the implant.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah.
it's very cool.
Yeah, it's a really nice piece of world building. But anyway, enough teasing for a thing. Let's not try and drive all the viewers away. I think this card is. I think there's a couple of like. I'm going to talk about the turning wheel for a moment because like, especially if you've started playing standard post the most recent set of rotations, this card is brand new. And but and so you might go, what is this? But this card I honestly think was in the top 5 most important runner cards in the entire format for about 3 to 4 years. I guess
For sure.
after something like that, yeah. Because basically this card was the way that runners created multi-access. And the way that Turning Wheel works is basically, yeah, it says whenever a run on HQ or R&D ends, put a power counter on it if no agendas were stolen. And this led to a lot of play patterns where either you got your turning wheel down early and you did a lot of poking and like slowly kind of got single accesses and then would kind of burst in little bits. But the most common play pattern was for the runner to set up an engine so the corp couldn't score. Then they would go and run HQ, jack out over and over again, and get four power counters. And if the corp still wasn't starting to score, they would just do that again and again and again, and then they would go and do this giant dig all on R&D at once. And that ended up being a pretty optimal play pattern a lot of the time. Um, and I think this that led to a very particular heavy control style game where you weren't trying to get accesses as much as you were trying to get the time to spend clicks to turn on your turning wheel. And I think Wake and Plant looks really different in that context.
I think it
Because
looks a lot nicer, actually.
Putting
To be
limits on
honest,
things is probably good for the health of the format.
because when I started watching games, it was really weird that people would just bounce continually, whereas this is a successful run, so you're actually like doing what you think the runner is meant to do, is actually get in, have a look at HQ, but then also get a counter. So
yeah, I think I don't want to talk about which card's better because I think they function differently, but it's totally worth to think
it
about.
feels
But
different, I think.
yeah, I think this is going to feel very different in play because now if you're going to include this in your deck, you have to actually plan to make runs on HQ that are successful, which is a very noticeable change.
I just love how perfect this is as a criminal way to do R&D multi-access.
Yeah, I also think this card is I don't I'm not I would not put a lot of money on this being the case, but I do think something like Wake Implant also makes Panweave a little bit make a little bit more sense. Where if I'm already running HQ a couple somewhat frequently, now the Panweave incidental value kind of stacks up. And Thanos saying, "Hey, Sneak Door also works with all of these with this card as well." Um, so it's
Uh,
definitely
we have a counter surveillance question, which I'm going to check the wording on because
no,
that card is weird.
yeah. I actually think I think this doesn't stack with counter surveillance because counter surveillance I think is instead of breaching.
Yeah.
So you cannot use Wake
Um,
and Plant on a counter surveillance run. If you're gonna, yeah,
yeah, right. Yes. Counter surveillance is a breach replacement. It replaces the breach with paying the credits. And then if you pay the credits, you access cards in a structure that is not technically a breach. And it has its own rule in the CR explaining how that works, and that yeah, you still have to go through R&D in order and stuff.
the counter surveillance section of the comprehensive rules.
I
But we've
love those
talked,
cards that have their own rule.
yeah. Um,
But you can put out like Dockland's Pass and everything like that, can't you? Have I remembered the right card?
Dockland's Pass doesn't work with counter surveillance, but in
No,
this
but with
case,
Wake.
Yeah,
With
with
Wake
Wake,
you
most
yeah,
can.
multi-access effects are trigger at the start of the breach.
yes,
Some of them sort of are two layered. So, like a Maker's Eye effect triggers when the run is successful, but all that ability does is set up the next trigger point, which is when you start the breach, it gives you the extra accesses then.
yeah, and something like you can actually, if you wanted to, run a twinning Wake Implant deck, and they would stack.
Ooh.
Um, and I think actually, so I
I
wanted
was
to,
going to ask, would you reasonably do this competitively
I
at
don't.
all?
Sounds like an incredible draft deck.
I think one of the reasons I wouldn't, though maybe you could, honestly, if you're going to do this deck, you probably could do it in Criminal, where you just play something like 3x Chesv, and then say, okay, I'm going to use my Chesv credits to get successful runs on HQ, charge up my twinning, and then go for these giant digs on R&D. Um, so maybe that is a real thing. The thing that I think is interesting about these cards is I think the twinning.
Ooh.
I'm more excited to see Wake and Plant in uh, Shaper. I mean, it's going to see a ton of play in Crim. I actually think it changes how Crim is going to play in like such a fundamental way, I might try and grab some Crim players and talk about if they agree with me or not, because I think fundamentally Crim has been this like super slow control deck that had no multi access for probably about 3 years, and I feel like this card changes this. Um,
So weird for Krim to be a slow control faction. So
um,
that sounds like a good thing.
yeah, I think it might be fun to put a little more zip and like punchiness into Criminal. Um, but I'm excited about this in Shaper because the twinning requires a lot of build around support, whereas Wake Implant just kind of
Mm.
says, make a good Netrunner deck and you'll get this to work, which I think is an interesting difference between the two. The twinning, you can
It
make it so it will always fire. The Wake Implant says, if you can make this, I'm a little bit like, I'm easier to get going, but maybe harder to keep going, which I think is an
and it
interesting.
really encourages you to play well. Like it keeps you from getting single-mindedly focused on either HQ or R&D and neglect the other,
Yeah. Yeah, I do think
which I think is
it's
great design.
yeah, I think it's great to see criminals get an R&D pressure card finally. Like it's only been a decade. Um, now we just need Shapers to get an HQ pressure card, and like that's why I'm excited to splash this in Shaper because I can play this as a 1x. I can afford to lose a card in my hand, um, and then I suddenly like I could play this in Dow, and suddenly the Corp now has to ice 2 out of 3 centrals, and that's maybe enough to make that ID pretty good. Who knows? I will never get off the Dow
Uh,
train, I think.
Solimer makes the important point that, contrary to what you might expect, this gets a counter every run on HQ.
Yeah, yeah. So you can if you can blow up the ice or just make it like if it ever ends up being a 1 credit uh, to access thing, like you can just build up these counters really fast and kind of lock out the corp quite quickly, which I think is a pretty rewarding board state to be in.
Like run twice event. Is there one of those for HQ or is it
There,
just R&D?
so there's 2 for R&D, right? Because FFG doesn't know how to do quality control. So this card is meant
Oh.
to say make a run on HQ. If successful, you may make another run on HQ when this run ends. If the second run is successful, gain 4 credits. But and that would make a lot of sense. It's a criminal card. But instead it says R&D. And there was already what is it called?
Right.
Data.
Yeah. So
Is
they
it
never fixed
data?
that or
They
and
they
or made
they never
a
they never
fixed
issued an
version.
errata or anything. So I do love that
Womp womp.
Shapers get the worst version of Run R&D twice.
Mm.
um, which is it's just pretty silly. There's also not much point in most decks of running R&D twice, though I guess arguably with cards like Top Hat, you could come up with a contrived reason. Um, but anyway. Um,
Yeah. It's particularly egregious because if it were if they hadn't made the error, it would still be kind of unfair in criminals' favor because criminals are getting like a second HQ run is more often valuable than a second R&D run, and
yeah.
the criminals are getting a bonus out of it, and the shapers are just getting the second run. That's what you get.
Yeah, it was an odd choice. But you know what? There's lots of odd choices, and I'm sure looking in like a 2 weeks we'll be going, why did we print cards with these text? But I think
I do that every day.
yeah, you probably do this more than almost anyone else.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, do we want to move on? Do either of you have any closing thoughts on this card before we move on to the next one?
Cool to move on.
JRJ.
All right, let's move
Yeah.
on to Zenith chip. This is a 1 cost unique Zenith chip JZ2MJ. It is a high hardware cybernetic and a chip. So all of you ScapeNet fans out there, hope you're getting your escapes ready. Um,
Yep.
that's what when you install this
And if
hardware.
you're a ScapeNet non-fan, you can blame me for this.
When you install this hardware, suffer 1 core damage. The first time each turn you make a successful run on the central server, draw 1 card. And then Zenith implants help you focus on the important things. Ampere Hollow Billboard. Um,
So
so,
yeah,
and this is 2
my
influence.
contribution to this card was it says chip in the title. It should be a chip. And I went to the dev team and said, "Hey, do we care about ScapeNet? Is that going to be mess up the balance situation?" And of course, ultimately, it was decided that no, that's okay. If we end up in a weird world where this card makes the difference between whether ScapeNet is playable or not, uh, the balance team can
Okay.
probably handle that.
Yeah, that does seem like a potentially balanceable thing in the future. So, yeah, like the obvious card, like I don't want to just always spend time comparing cards to existing cards, though obviously that's going to be something you do a lot with Criminal. But I think
You're going to
people
say
are,
the obvious card is a different card than I'm going to say is the obvious card.
uh, okay, I'm going to guess that your card starts with a J.
Yes.
Okay. That's the
And yours
other
starts with a
obvious
D.
card. Yes, exactly. So DreamNet is obviously the standard legal version of this, and the big difference is, of course, this costs you a core damage, whereas this costs you 2 credits. Um, nice more often saying, mine starts with an L, it's Eliza Talking Thunder. Um, which is also a great shout. I think, like, DreamNet doesn't see a ton of play, and so it's like, oh, why would you print a worse version of DreamNet? And it's like, well, maybe we made a mistake. I don't know. That could be the case. I
I,
personally. Oh no, go ahead,
This is
Ginevra.
not a worse version of
I
DreamNet.
was going to say, like, maybe not at the top tables, but like in kind of more average play. I've seen lots of DreamNet. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not convinced.
and to be honest, we're seeing more and more DreamNet showing up, and I think it's also something that's I personally would often would rather lose a card in my hand than pay 2 credits. I think, like, uh, I think that to me is a bonus I care about. Like, throwing down a 1 cost card is usually a lot easier than throwing down a 3 cost card. Um,
Mm.
just sort of. But
Yeah.
also, yeah, there's a lot of other stuff. So it's like Doomrat mentioning this being a hardware rather than a resource means you don't get turned off. It doesn't get really turned off easily by just tag punishment. Um,
And people
You can
mentioning
install it
that,
mid-run with
like,
Masterwork.
yes,
yeah, and then Essa is also the other one to shout out as well, obviously, where for damage you see the card, it's only 2 influence, and you definitely start looking at it for splashing.
Yeah, it's a good splash. I definitely expect to see this in Ace decks.
Yeah. I also think there's maybe an interesting world where like you didn't want to run 2 DreamNets because finding it the second one was like such a downside. It was like, oh, now I could instead of that second DreamNet, I could run 1 Zenith chip and 1 DreamNet and just have this really
So
consistent run-based draw engine.
I don't know because I think decks that just want the draw effect also want to mitigate the cost of DreamNet by pulling it off a Gachapon, and you can't get hardware off Gachapon.
Hmm.
And then decks that actually want to do the link thing or the digital thing want to have 3 copies of DreamNet.
Yeah. That's fair.
Mm. I'd also like to shout out the art, which I really, really like on this one. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, it's a slightly different view, I almost feel, of the world. But, like, yeah, I really love the art with her just, like, waiting there and watching the people.
Yeah, it's got a very distinct. I don't know. It's an interesting
Like,
style of
eerie,
art.
sort
So,
of.
yeah. Uh, Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty high on this card, but I think seeing people's expectations, it's it'll be interesting to see where this card lands. I think it's actually one of the interesting things about so many of these cards was like everyone sort of landed in different places for where they thought these cards were going to be, and it's like this set of criminal cards I think is really going to be interesting to see where they actually end up in the final cut, so to
It's a
speak.
very exciting set of cards.
Yeah.
And maybe hopefully some of these cards change, like people's evaluations of these cards will change if the meta changes or like future sets or stuff like that. Like it'd be interesting to see if they can rise and fall kind of in interest.
Yeah, for sure. Like this is a card where like yeah, if Thule is a big part of the meta, you probably don't want this card as much. But if it's not, like suddenly this card like I don't know, I find a card and a core damage to be not a huge cost in a lot of cases. Um, but let's we've talked we've
Let's
talked that
focus
card a
in on our
lot.
next card.
So yeah, let's regain our focus and really buckle down and get some tunnel vision on it. Um, yeah. So this is tunnel vision. It is a 2-cost 2 MU program AI icebreaker. When your turn begins, identify your mark. Interface 2 credits. Break up to 2 subroutines on a piece of ice, protecting your mark, and then 2 credits plus 2 strength, and a base strength of 2 and 3 influence. And so, and then with flavor text, how could I pick a favorite? They're all good dogs. Quoted to Sable.
Yeah.
It's the dog set.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this is the dog half of the cycle.
Yes.
Previous set was
We've,
the cat half.
we've got our Siberian like sled dogs. I don't actually know what they're called. And then we've also got Bankar in the set. And for anybody who doesn't know, Bankar, the word is Mongolian uh, dog breed, and I'm pretty sure Bankar the character has a Bankar dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
I got to
guess
learn about Bankar when I was working on World Breakers. I wrote a piece of flavor text about them, and then they showed up in Netrunner too, and I was like, oh wow.
double dipping, all that worldly knowledge paying off. So what are your two, Ginevra, what are your thoughts about this card?
So it's probably an incorrect evaluation, but I was like, oh, cool. Like it's things that tell me that I need to identify a mark. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll put it straight in Sable. I don't know. I kind of felt listening to your video, Esengrin, that maybe you weren't as keen on this one.
Well,
But
we don't have to listen to me because I have not a not great track record on this, on most things, honestly, when it comes to Netrunner balance. So I'm really like, I saw a lot of people were excited about this card, and I think there's good reasons to be excited about this card. Um, so I don't want to cut you off trying to second guess yourself here.
yeah, I guess it can't be your only probably breaker, but it could be your key one, maybe.
Yeah,
Would that be
I
reasonable?
think this is a card for decks that are going all in on the mark stuff. Like, uh, if if you're uh, Sable, or if you're on Virtuoso and you have other like successful run triggers and ways to benefit no matter what server turns out to be your mark, then this is an excellent way to consistently reap those benefits every turn.
Yeah, I think basically my comment on like it's interesting. I think when you start to be like, tunnel vision is like very much a support card to me. Like you can't build a game plan around getting a random central server like guaranteed a successful run. So you have to find ways to stack up value. So it's stuff like, oh yeah, maybe the wake implant and the Zenith chip and the virtuoso trigger. And if we can assemble this mass of triggers that are all good-ish on their own, but not like winning on their own, if you can assemble enough of them, maybe you can turn that economic advantage, into something. I think if you're in Sable, this starts looking pretty good. And I actually think probably combos well with Amakua, because now they can't purge you out. You can get through a high strength ice to get an Amakua counter. You get the credit back, and then you just have this like 2-piece rig that's 5 credits and will let you bust remotes as you go into the late game. So I definitely think this card has actually some real potential to it. It's just it does feel like it's going to take some clever deck building and sort of contortions to make it sing very well. So
I think my plan is to build. So my current startup Crim build is Zaya Stealth, and of course all the stealth stuff is rotating. So I think I'm going to do Zaya Mark stuff, and just throw in all
With
the multi-access I
Virtuoso?
possibly can, and all the Mark cards, and just tunnel vision my way into centrals, and then breach HQ after.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doomrat is also calling out Virtuoso, like a tunnel vision Virtuoso Amakua means whenever you run a non-HQ server, you'll get 2 counters on that Amakua for zero clicks, provided you can get in spending your tunnel vision money. And then at some point, your Amakua will scale up past your tunnel vision. The corp will spend time purging, and then you just get to reset. So you get this like little 3-card cyclic feedback loop, which could really be something potentially.
Having fun. It's not necessarily a good idea, but I've been having fun just putting one card that generates you mark in someone who doesn't use mark at all. So you just kind of get a mark occasionally. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I'm not saying that that's like the most competitive minded type deck, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that one way
I
to
do
play.
want. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, Jamie, go ahead. I talk all the time.
I mean, so do I. Um, I do want one of the like cool Netrunner moments. The thing that I want to do is get the surprise mark play where you aren't playing Sable, you drop
Yeah.
a mark card, and then you Carpe Diem to get the benefit right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an option. I was checking a message.
That's like one of those swag moves that's like you just feel so good if you do it.
Yeah, no, you
Sometimes.
tunnel vision and then grab a mark mid-turn. But yeah, I don't know. I think this card's like we don't have. I think like basically every criminal card that we've talked about today synergizes with tunnel vision. I would guess, except maybe Reprise, though. Like you could make that stretch. So like, while it's not like a standout card on its own, criminal often is just building decks that is like each card generates 1.1 value, and when you can get enough of them together, now you get to actually extract that decimal value into real value in extra accesses, extra credits that you shouldn't normally have, and kind of get through it. Should we move on to the next card? Okay, I'll take that deafening silence as a yes. No. This is another one of the cards that I spoiled in my video. You could check out that video, though. My goodness, do I talk? I just don't like how I talk. So, but anyway, this is Nanook. It is a 4-cost 2MU program. Icebreaker AI is base strength of 3. And it has an interface, 2 credits, break up to 2 subroutines, plus 1 credit, or 1 credit plus 1 strength, and base strength of 3 and 5 influence. So
Papers are like, you have a mayfly? I have a bear spirit.
yeah, so I guess like what like Mayfly is the very obvious comparison, but like what's like I feel like this card just calling this like oh it's Mayfly with +2 strength feels like underselling it a little bit.
It's
Um,
better than that for sure.
yeah,
It's mayfly until you actually get something.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the big thing. Is like Mayfly if the corp rezzed a border control, uh, you were like oh no I just wasted my Mayfly on nothing. Like if the border control was like
Mm.
the second ice you broke, you're just like oh there goes my Mayfly for
Well,
nothing. And the nuke is obviously not going to have that problem.
But it's still kind of something that goes at some stage, or goes and waits.
Yeah, yeah,
it,
goes and waits out of
it's
the
a
game. The flavor text I have to admit is a little bit odd for this one, but that's okay. Uh,
waits for
at
you to
least to
find your
me.
next copy.
Yeah, exactly. But then you can only find it 3 times, and then it's gone forever.
Yeah, but how many times are agendas scored or stolen anyway?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's I
Like by
think
the
that
It
time you've been
depends
through
on the
all three
meta.
copies, the game's almost over.
yeah, I think this icebreaker I think swings wildly dependent on the state of the meta and if you want to include support cards for it. Because I think there actually are some ways that this card maybe never has to become uninstalled until you win the game. Um, notably
Want to
like Imp.
explain more?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
imp.
So
Imp, Stargate,
Imp is probably the
Ah.
Carnivore.
biggest one. Yeah, carnivore. I mean, look, if Nanook carnivore becomes a deck, I will be over the moon.
Make it
That would just be
happen.
yeah.
Do it.
I'll
I dare
do it.
you.
Yeah, let me just. The question is, which way do I splash on that one?
That's a tough choice because
Because like I
there's so
want
many
to
cards that you want out of Anarch
wait.
with for the carnivore synergy, but
Steelskin's
Nanook is
what 2
fine
influence,
influence.
right? Steelskin's 2. Okay, carnivore. Okay, so we could do this. We could play 2 copies of carnivore, 3 copies of Steelskin, and we still have 3 influence left to play with, so we can grab a paperclip. And that's got to be enough synergy. Um, or we can grab a Stargate instead, as Salmer's pointing out. So, yeah, no, never mind. Hold on. I now know what my first release stream is going to be, is the Carnivore Bear. But
I, I mean, bears are omnivores
it's true.
actually,
It's
but
true.
it still works.
Yeah, maybe be called like bear trap or something because carnivore kind of looks like it's a bear trap on its art. But yeah, the
True.
idea just to spell it out explicitly, imp. Normally, when you access an agenda, you have to steal it, but imp has this. I'm gonna call it a pay to build. Sorry, I'll just try and be slightly correct. It has an accessibility that allows you to trash an agenda or any card you're accessing, and that occurs before the runner would be forced to steal the agenda. So you get to go and throw the accessed agenda into the trash.
Put on the rolls hat for a second. Mid accessibilities still are paid abilities.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I tried to get it right and still got it wrong. So, oh well.
You're doing fine.
That said, Cranked is calling out one of the big uh, one of the big challenges for this card is going to be, hey, if I'm playing up against Wayland, I install the Nanook, and then the corp goes and scores a hostile takeover. I feel pretty bad,
Mm.
and and the same is going to be true of Elvigar bifurcation. And I feel like I saw notes about there being maybe more 2/1s in the set, so that could be a real limiter for the card.
I love
But
Nice More
if
Often's
people,
comment about they need to unban it because it's a current.
So for those of you, yeah, who are not getting that joke, which took me a long time to get the first time I saw that they threw that up in GLC. Um, if you look at like a current, just any hypothetical current, it says this card is not trashed until another current is played or an agenda is stolen. And if it's a runner current, it's until an agenda is scored. And so basically, Nanook is the two halves of the current clause. So
Mm.
it's I think honestly, Jamie, I'm a little bit surprised you didn't have a current subtype put on this card, but
Get banned.
To the list of program subtypes, which I don't want to do that.
yeah, I guess actually that would, if this had the current subtype, it would trash event currents when it was installed. Because
Yep,
it's oh
that is a thing that would happen if you put weird things happen if you put subtypes on other types when it was originally intended to only work with particular types.
yeah
Thanks,
yeah.
corporate troubleshooter, MCA informant.
But yeah, I don't know. I obviously was like, oh, I'm pretty scared of what Nanook can do because I think a control shaper deck that like tries to basically never steal agendas until it absolutely has to seems pretty solid. Um, but a lot of people seemed a little bit more lukewarm on this card, and you know, we'll have to
You
see.
framed it in your video as a remote buster, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's great. Like I think I have a Cabanesa Chameleon deck, and I'm totally slotting this in that because there's going to come a time when I don't have the clicks to drop Chameleon and a solution to some other subtype or whatever. But I can probably pay uh, three minus the number of DZMZs I have installed
yeah, yeah.
to get an AI at five strength because I have Cyber Trooper out, or maybe a Turbine. No, it doesn't work with Turbine because I have Cyber Trooper out, and just go for the turn.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I want to quickly shout out Nice More Often's comment. Like, it's good, but it's hard to judge because the control shaper archetype is not being played a lot. I think that's kind of true of a lot of the runner cards. Is like are supporting archetypes that are not currently the best in standard, so it's a little bit tricky to figure out where you actually end up evaluating them. Which I think, having played with them a bit, is maybe why I'm a little bit higher on them. But you
Yeah,
never
I
know.
think
So.
if all the runner cards are like supporting archetypes that aren't getting played yet, and people are sick of the current boat decks or whatever, that doesn't sound like a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think it does make it
Oh,
it makes
Trooper's
it,
also non-AI. Dang it!
it does make it hard to evaluate cards when they're like supporting archetypes that don't exist. And I think that's one of the interesting things that Midnight Sun and now Parhelion are doing is they're trying to expand the archetype. Excuse me,
Mm.
expand the archetypal space of what's playable or what's supported. Maybe is maybe a better word.
Yeah, and I certainly hope that uh, we are able to keep uh, supporting the archetypes that we introduce. Like, uh, you know,
Mm.
one of my big disappointments with FFG is how few Wayland agendas post Order and Chaos use agenda counters.
Hmm.
Mm.
Because Titan Transnational, uh, that's the thing that it does. And, eventually the game got to a point where just having an Atlas counter without having to advance it the turn before was strong enough that it was a good idea. It even got banned, right? I'm
Yeah,
remembering that right.
Titan. Yes, Titan did get banned. Yes.
Um, but like that wasn't necessarily the only thing. Like when Order and Chaos came out, uh, you didn't have the super efficient kind of fast event. We didn't have Audacity yet. We didn't. You had to import all of your fast advanced stuff if you wanted to do that. And it kind of just broke the rule uh, about Wayland is only scary if they advance the cards. Like to that point in the game, Wayland was pretty much you can ignore unadvanced remotes and it won't be a big deal because if they score an Atlas with no counters, who cares? If they score an Atlas with a counter, that's when things start getting dicey. And Titan was interesting because it broke that rule, and it was interesting because it let you do other weird things. But we never really got any new weird things. Like the only card that came out after it that really works with the ability is Armored Servers.
I pride myself on knowing every card in Netrunner, and this one I knew the name and know none of the text on it. But
it makes it hard to break subroutines.
Yeah, I guess.
It's really weird.
Trash a card from their grip as an additional cost to break a subroutine. Wow, that's quite something. Yeah, other people cranked.
I am forgetting about Broad Daylight's the one in Reign and Reverie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And then
good
also,
in Titan.
High risk investment.
Like it's for the outfit, but
yeah, but sure.
High risk investment was in Order and Chaos, so that doesn't count as something that came
doesn't
out
count
later
as later
to
support.
further expand the archetype.
All right. Well, I think we've gone now deep into a tangent, so we should maybe talk about the last. Oh, actually, Ginevra.
That's what you get when you invite me on your show.
Ginevra, I realized we've mostly Jamie and I talked past you, so I want to give you a chance.
Okay. I just wanted to shout out the art because it's really, really beautiful, and also I really like that the colors, like that kind of, I guess it's the Borealis, the midnight sun, the thing in the background is like across the runner and the corp cards, and it kind of like is a whole mood, which I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, no, it's a really nice thematic or like just artistic tie-in across the cards. Yeah, this is maybe not personally my favorite Adam Doyle piece, but I definitely it's still a very good piece of art for sure. I think Tunnel Vision, I of the 3 AIs I got, I think is probably my favorite art, even though I'm not a huge dog person. Oh, whoops! There goes half my chat.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted by this revelation that going back to the tangent, that Mark Gale is being played in Eternal.
Oh what? Yeah, Mark Yale is getting played in Eternal, and I think if you think about it for just a second, you'll know why. Bob Super Heavy Logistics.
What's the res cost?
Res cost of Mark Yale is 1, which is a really good res cost with a trash can ability to have.
With a trash ability with like no prerequisites or anything.
Yep.
It's just you can gain $2.
Gain $2 and install a Rashida, install a Spin Doctor, install a Jackson Howard, whatever you want.
I miss the days when Mark Yale was a good card just for like normal econ spend your Titan counters purposes.
Yeah.
Score hostile takeover, get an extra 2 credits.
All right. Let's talk about the penultimate card, though if Andre is here, this is the last card.
The anti-penultimate card and the pre-anti-penultimate card and
so Andre, if you're here, this is the last card. Everyone else stick around after this card for something else. But yeah, this is Matryoshka, which I think I just said wrong after trying to look it up and make sure I was pronouncing it right for the video, because
sounds right to me.
But let's see. Matryoshka. Sorry, say that again. Matryoshka? Matryoshka.
I am not a Russian speaker, by the way, but that's my best.
3 cost, 2 MU, program Icebreaker AI. When your turn begins, turn each hosted card face up. Click. Host a copy of Matryoshka from your grip face up on this program. It is not installed. Don't know why I stumbled over it after reading it so many freaking times to get right in my video. But anyway, interface X credits. Turn one hosted copy of Matryoshka face down. That's all the cost. And then it says break X subroutines. And then 1 credit plus 1 strength. Limit 6 per deck. And it is a base strength 2. And it is 0 influence. So I see people in, Cranked once again saying, I'm also looking forward to using SGP to bounce this because all of the hosted copies of Matryoshka would get trashed. But this is sort
Yep.
of like a classic. I'm going to call it I called it in the video a build around AI, where it's just got this really fun power fantasy, and so it's just catnip to deck building.
So there are some questions in the chat.
Yeah.
You cannot sell face downs on Matryoshka to Aesops, and you cannot use the abilities on hosted Matryoshkas because they are not installed. So the hosted Matryoshkas are just like cards on Personal Workshop, Polly's Cafe, Street Peddler. What else hosts cards that aren't
The
installed?
supplier.
Bookmark. Like, is anything still in standard besides Polly's that does that?
I think it's an effect that got mostly taken out of the game. Yeah.
There is at least one more that I'm thinking of that where a card that hosts non-installed cards, but I don't think we've seen it yet.
Yes, I think I know what you're thinking of, but
So there's your teaser.
yes, and for Salmer, stop the clock, or reset the clock, excuse me. But I also want to give Jamie a quick shout out because this text is almost completely different from the playtest text while still being functionally effectively identical. So I want to give you a huge shout out for sorting this out. And I think actually, while it's a little bit wordy, being a fairly intuitive to play version of this, which is, I think, quite nice.
And I will shout out the whole rules team and development team. This was a big team effort. It was a very difficult card to write. Easily the top 2 in the set. Partially in the set. Ob still wins.
Ob still wins. Ob is probably the limit of complexity, I think.
Uh-huh. But yeah, we talked through what is the core part of the design, what is supposed to happen, what is kind of incidental, and how do we fit these things together. In the absolutely ideal world, they would all be like, it would be like a nested demon tree, right? You stack one on the next one, on the next one, on the next one, and there didn't turn out to be a good way to do that exact structure that was like simple enough to reasonably write on a card.
Yeah.
But the flipping posted copies as a way to track uh, how many encounters you get.
Usage.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm really happy we came up with that. I think that was a good solution.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great solution.
Definitely.
Yeah. It is hard to figure out it's hard to know like how you would reference a hosted card on a hosted card. Like it's just not that loop is not easy to figure out.
Yeah, so I was considering stuff like each copy of Matryoshka would give the card hosted on it an ability, which doesn't quite work because you can do like a tree instead of just a single stack.
Yeah, you could fork it
And then
out.
also it was determined that having the hosted copies be installed was not okay
Yeah.
because that triggers a lot of things and you can exploit a lot if they were installed. So the hosted
Yeah.
cards not being installed is an important thing to remember.
Oh yeah. People, I'm not gonna pull it up because I have to resize these images whenever I pull them in. But there are in fact 6 different flavor texts for each copy of Matryoshka. Um, they are all like, if you're really really try hard, I guess you could buy 6 copies of Parhelion, help out NSG a lot, and then play with just one flavor text copy. But I think in
Or
Is
general,
is
there
thinking
is
you
there
could just
anyone who
print
is
and
that
play.
try hard who's going to build Matryoshka decks?
I mean, you never know. People have done stranger things. Though I would suggest in that case, instead of buying 6 copies, send NSG a small donation and then just print proxy a particular
Yeah.
version. They all
Or
have the
yeah.
same set number though. They're all card number 94. So like the card number I have is 94.1, I think. And then like 90 here. I will go and pull 94.2 in just so I can demonstrate this. Because demonstrating is always the best. It's just going to look real ugly for a second. I was actually super happy that someone spotted it live. I tried to do a really subtle fade from one copy to
Yeah.
the next in the video. But yeah.
Looking for it, and I thought it worked really well in
Yeah.
the video. So good job.
Thanks. But yeah, so these are both going to be card 94. They are all equal copies because the title of the card, I think, specifies its uniqueness, not all of the other text on the card. Not that I think that's relevant. I don't think we're getting any
I mean, flavor text
stickers
is
on
non-functional
cards.
anyway.
That's
We
true.
have lots of cards with different printings that have different flavor texts.
That's a very good point. Um, we have managed to talk about Matryoshka for probably 10 minutes without ever talking about Matryoshka, or how it's going to play. Ginevra, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes. For me as a player, I look at it and think it's fun, but it's also maybe quite fiddly. So it's probably something I won't explore to start with. I'll probably explore it later on. I'm curious. In the video, one of my curiosities was, do you think you would play all 6? Which I think you're saying, yeah. I guess the other thing is that I've seen, say, in Mumbai the 6 of cards, and I'm really happy that there's a 6 of coming back. Like that idea hasn't died. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In the transition from FFG to NSG. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as usage, I think maybe do you want to talk about how you would see it being used? Because you were pretty keen. Was that a right feeling?
I was pretty keen on it, and then I remembered how many ways there are to trash cards right now. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe a little bit less so. But I actually want to I want to have Jamie answer first because this is like a Jamie card to the T is my understanding.
I will definitely build a Matryoshka deck. I'm not sure where I'm going to build it yet. Um, it is very fragile. That's definitely true, and I think uh, not only is rig disruption very prevalent between what we already have and what we've seen so far of Parhelion, uh, there's just very little you can do to mitigate it. Like Dummy Box is a weird card, but you can play it.
Well,
But
actually,
it
no,
doesn't
that
stop things like Self Growth Program or any other kind of disruption that's not trashing.
yeah, I will say the nice thing is if you're going to play Dummy Box Matryoshka, you will probably have a program in your hand that you could throw away to stop
Yeah.
Matryoshka from getting trashed. Um, and I think it's
Uh,
like, oh, go ahead.
I think so. I think I would love to have a world at some point where there is sort of defensive stuff that you can actively protect cards in your rig from a broader array of disruption effects.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're going to get that ever again, because I don't think NSG has really printed anything that prevents damage, anything that prevents trashing, uh, ever at all. About the only thing we have is like remove tags as far as
Yeah.
defensive stuff.
Yeah.
But we'll see where the design team takes the game as it goes on, and if we do get that, then great. Maybe I can make a actually like plausible deck. Like my favorite thing to do is take a weird concept, some kind of janky engine, and when I start, the deck will just be barely hanging together and we'll lose a lot of games, but I'll iterate on it and eventually get something that I feel like I can pilot well and is in its best form and that can like not be top tier. I don't usually win tournaments, but I can at least like have good games and keep up to that level. Uh and this is not currently that like I'm not gonna even try to like make a reasonable deck. When I build this, it will be one of those decks. It's like, yeah, this is weird jank, and I'm only going to play it like once against a rig shooter deck,
And then
and
it
then I'll
goes
just
back in
only
the
play it if
box.
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotta
like if people want to play and they're going to play something that's not rig shooter, great, cool, I'll play it. But just like sort of pulling out your good deck or whatever, I'm not going to play this against you.
question. Can you use this in? Well, would it? Eternal's kind of a weird meta.
I
Can
actually
you
no.
use it in Eternal with all of the stuff that, like, Eternal has lots of protective things?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think it's a little bit. I think there's probably better options for you, but I don't think it's as. It's not like a completely out there idea. Like it is definitely a
What?
bit slow, but like it does some stuff that other AIs don't do for decks. Like in particular, there's something like Eliza Talking Thunder deck where they want to not. They're drawing a lot. They don't want to install like they don't want to install a ton of cards, but they're probably planning to only break a couple of ice every turn. Like Matryoshka is actually probably quite solid there, and is I can guarantee not going to get eternal pointed, unlike some of the other AI options. I think it's unlikely to see much play in that format, but I do think people
So
have been
what I'm
talking.
wondering then is what are the disruption effects that see play in Eternal? Because if it's just trash stuff, you can run SatCon in
Yeah, that's
Eternal.
true.
But if there's
Yeah,
like weirder stuff, like a subroutine that puts a thing on top of your stack, then that hoses Matryoshka pretty hard.
yeah. It's SGP doesn't get played a ton, but it definitely does get played some. Um, But I also want to. I think I want to quickly shout out a lot of people in the chat have talked about like, oh, what if we use this as a backup breaker as in something like Kit? And I think that's like a really nice idea as a way to just extend your ID ability. And now you're not like if it gets trashed, yeah, you have some other copies, and maybe you don't need to run all six then, so you get some deck slots back, and the card starts looking like it has a nice little, excuse me, a nice little niche in the deck. Um, but yeah. All right, I feel like we've talked about this card for a long time. We've been also running quite long, but we do have one more card to talk about. So let's transition over to that, and then we will call it a night. Um, so this is a corp card. This was stealthily spoiled last night on the Metropole Grid's regular stream. Um, this is Yakov Erikovnich Avdakov.
Avdakov.
Avdakov. It is
You could just call him Butcher.
the butcher. He he is 2 to res, upgrade, executive, and 2 to trash, and it says and it is 2 influence, all 2s just everywhere. This is the second. This is
It was a
one
really
of.
important res cost.
Whenever a player trashes a card, including this upgrade, from the root of this server or protecting it, except during installation, gain 2 credits. Um, Very quickly, Crush You. Yes, the Jinteki ID does score with seamless, or does trigger off of seamless launch. But anyways, onto this card. This is very, very, very obviously an op card. Um, I think there's so like you will not see me probably not include 2 to 3 copies of this in every deck I play for years. Um, but I think this card, like the obvious synergy to me is like if you turn 1, go like border control, yeah, or like maybe let's put a 3-cost piece of ice down. Enigma, Yakov, Rashida. Like there's just so much tempo there. I can't stop myself. It seems fantastic. Um,
Mutually assured destruction, gain a pile of money.
yeah, just trash this card and all the ice in it, and like make all the money you need to do the rest of your combo. I think it's quite something.
Yeah. One thing I particularly love about this card is the Wayland executive with feet on desk thing is so classic Netrunner. We've seen it so many times. This is, I believe, the first time we've ever seen it from the back.
Yeah.
That's actually funny. You're right. I can't think of a Wayland exec where we can't see their face. That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
I also like that the character has continued, like it didn't just stop with Midnight Sun.
Yeah,
kind of.
Lucky Eric. He gets to be a recurring character, just like he's been a recurring character in the Netrunner community, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably why it's facing backwards, is because it wouldn't be fair to give him his face on 2 cards
Yeah.
for one reward.
Though I think next year we're gonna get like 5 Sokka cards if I'm counting correctly, or something like that. But
Well, Sokka earned that.
Yeah.
Sokka did earn all of those cards, so I look forward to seeing them. Probably not next year, to be honest, but in some year in the future, it'll be the year of Sokka Redux. But yeah, it's hard to one thing to note, I guess, this card is not persistent. So if you're the runner, you probably trash this first if you're going to, when you make a successful run on the server and go about trashing things, assuming you have the credits. Because it will then only give the corp the 2 credits back, and then you can trash their other stuff and they won't get the 2 credits off of it.
What's the other stuff is nano-etching matrix. What?
Oh no, Jamie, is this going in your mirror morph decks?
I don't know.
It seems a little
I think my
niche
mirror
for
morph is
that,
too
but
wide for it, honestly.
yeah.
Like the way I typically play mirror morph, I'm not doing a clown car.
Yeah. This is very focused on one server.
Yeah, no, this is like I have a server I care about. I think this can support like a like I'm gonna call it almost like a CTM asset deck, where it's like you've got like 3 or 4 assets out there and then like 1 ice remote kind of thing. That style of game plan seems potentially like it might work with this card. But this definitely is like if you can get like a Yakov and then also oh shoot, what's the card? Overseer Matrix.
Yep.
In a server, like that starts becoming a really obnoxious server to clear out as the runner.
Oh god, yeah. Huge credit swings.
Yeah. And all of your campaigns, your Regolith mining licenses, your Maryland campaigns, like you already want like odd players already were getting really good at like X trash as their card search, and now this just like says now you don't just get your ID ability, you also get all this credit tempo. So I think that's quite fun. Oh, that's a good question. Jamie, what does this card do with respect to APOC?
Works a lot like the old hostile infrastructure deal.
Cool.
Every card getting trashed from the root of that server or protecting it is going to give you a trigger.
Very cool.
Because they're all trashed at the same time.
So you get lots of money.
You get lots of money.
Oh.
You probably are getting APOC, so it feels a little less good, but
yeah. I will note that since it says from the root of the server or protecting it, this does not trigger if you put it on HQ or R&D and they trash cards out of Central.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, but that's a very nice
Yeah,
clarification.
yeah. Somebody in the comments said something about in the server, and I wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have gone pretty long for one of these, but I don't mind at all. This has been a lot of fun chatting to both of you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it's been fun.
Uh, if people have not, they should go listen to the ShadowNet episode. It's got Ansuke Morgan along with Eric and Phil. It's a fantastic little show. They talk a lot about the narrative design of the set and then about the criminal cards we let off the stream with. So please do check it out. There'll be a link in the description to this video that you're watching on YouTube. And thank you everyone for coming
And
by.
check it. It's Sangren's video too on YouTube.
I mean, I
Yeah.
guess
With all
if
of
you
the
really want
AIs.
to.
Yeah.
If you're watching this on YouTube, the previous thing on the channel.
Yes, exactly.
Incidentally, are daily casts happening over the weekend, or are we seeing you again on Monday?
I assuming there's cards spoiled, I will be here.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah. So I will most likely.
I do think there is some stuff on the schedule for the weekends, from what I remember, but it probably won't be a ton of cards.
There will probably not be a 90-minute long episode, but there will be a stream tomorrow. I can say, I think, with some confidence. So I will hopefully see all of you all tomorrow, and have a good night, everyone.
Good night.